They said the land was cursed, but Elias Callahan bought it anyway. $14 and a handshake sealed the deed, and not a soul came to see him sign it. Even the notary kept one hand on the Bible and the other near his pistol. No one said why the stretch past the river sat untouched for 20 years. They just watched from shaded porches as Eli rode out, a mule dragging a cart of tools and a tent, his shoulders hunched like a man bearing penance. The acre was raw and quiet, tucked between dying cottonwoods and a dry creek bed. Nothing moved but wind and regret. He dropped his gear and stood there a long time, listening to the silence the way some men listen for sermons. There was something about a place that had been abandoned, not forgotten. No, this land had been remembered too well. Remembered like a wound. He set to work without fanfare, driving fence posts, clearing dead brush, digging latrine and wells side by side. The soil was dry but not dead, stubborn but familiar. He knew the feel of land that had seen blood. The war had taught him that much. By the second night, blisters bloomed on his palms, and sweat carved tracks down his spine. He didn't light a fire, not because of coyotes or snakes, but because he couldn't stand the thought of being seen. The town of Whisper Hollow kept its distance. He'd gone in only once, for nails and flour. Heads had turned like weather vanes in a storm. The barkeep wouldn't meet his eyes. A boy spat at his boots and ran laughing. Sheriff Bridger leaned on the post office railing and called out, "That land don't want company, Callahan." Eli didn't answer. He just tipped his hat like a man too tired to argue. He didn't expect kindness, so when Myra Langley came up the road at dusk, he almost mistook her for a ghost. She carried a small parcel and didn't smile. "You'll need this," she said, holding out a loaf of bread wrapped in calico. He took it with both hands. "You always feed fools." "Only the ones who bleed quiet," she said, and walked back the way she came. That night, he sat under the broken pecan tree, chewing slowly, tasting ash and wheat. The sky stretched wide, and the stars looked like eyes. By dawn, he was back at the well. The ground was harder than it ought to be. 10 feet down, he hit something with a hollow thunk. Not stone, not root, wood. He knelt, brushed away dirt, fingers trembling. A sound rose from below, soft, rhythmic. 3 knocks. Not echo, not accident. Answer. Eli didn't sleep that night. He sat by the half-dug well with his rifle across his knees, the cold seeping through his coat and the stars gleaming too sharp to be trusted. The knocking hadn't come again, but the silence afterward felt heavier, like the earth was waiting to be asked the right question. By dawn, he'd made up his mind. If the land wanted to speak, he'd listen. The Lord knew he wasn't sure he had the right to hear anything anymore. He dug slow, careful, like uncovering the edge of a confession. Another foot down, the dirt turned black, loamy, and too soft for prairie soil. He struck wood again, flat, rotted, thin. A box, not coffin-sized, but wide enough to hold history. He pried it open with a crowbar. Inside lay a child's shoe, caked in dry mud. A porcelain doll with one eye missing. A photograph, its edges curled by moisture. 3 figures stood solemn before a homestead. A man in a tattered uniform, a woman clutching a baby, and a little girl with ribbons in her braids. Eli stayed long enough to feel his heartbeat shift. He didn't know their names, but somehow, their silence felt familiar. By mid-morning, he was in town, photograph in hand. No one spoke to him, but eyes followed as he walked into Myra Langley's shop, where the air smelled of starch and lavender. She looked up from her stitching. Her hands stilled. "Where did you find that?" she asked, voice thin as thread. "On my land." Her face changed, not in fear, but grief. She took the photograph with fingers that trembled. "That's my sister's girl," she said. "They lived there once, long ago. Folks called it Salt Widow's Acre after it all went quiet." "What happened?" Myra looked past him, out the window. Her husband deserted the Confederates. They hid here, trying to start over. The town didn't forgive cowards, not even with a baby in the crib. Eli swallowed hard, shame scraping the back of his throat. He'd seen men burn homes for less during the war. Hell, he'd lit a few himself. "I thought they left," she said, almost to herself. But she stopped writing. I never knew why. He handed her the doll. She took it like it was made of fire. That night, someone left a dead chicken nailed to his gatepost. A message, old as time. Asterisk don't stir the past at asterisk. He burned it without a word. By morning, he was digging again. Not just the well, but the foundation of something else. Something lasting. Myra returned near dusk. No bread this time. Only her eyes, steady and sad. They won't like it, she said. I ain't doing it for them. He showed her the clearing. The stones he'd begun to stack. A school, he said. A pause. You sure ghosts make good students. I'm hoping they make better teachers. From deep in the well, the wind rose again. And beneath it, something else, a whisper like breath through bone. The fire came at sundown, blown in on a hot wind that smelled of copper and panic. Eli saw it crest the ridge like a living thing, red-tongued and ravenous, devouring mesquite and sagebrush as it thundered toward Whisper Hollow. Sparks swirled above the treetops like vengeful stars. He didn't hesitate. He ran. By the time he reached town, the sky had darkened with smoke and the church bell was clanging like a heart in its death throes. Men hauled buckets in frantic lines. Women herded children into the saloon. And Myra stood alone at the edge of the street, her eyes searching the horizon. Your land's in its path, she said. Eli nodded. So's the past. They ran together, past scorched fences and dry creek beds. When they reached Salt Widow's Acre, the fire was close enough to feel on their skin. The well stood like a sentinel, smoke curling around it. Eli grabbed a shovel, began digging a firebreak with a strength born of guilt and stubborn grace. You'll kill yourself, Myra shouted. Then I'll die useful. She didn't argue. She picked up another shovel. The wind howled. Embers flew like angry birds. Eli's arms burned with every stroke, lungs ragged from ash, but he didn't stop. Not when the fire licked the edge of the new foundation. Not when it roared close enough to blister the air between them. Then, a miracle. A pale boy appeared on the hill with a bucket. Behind him, another, and another. Half the town, wide-eyed but moving, drawn by something neither fear nor reason could hold back. Sheriff Bridger stood last among them, jaw clenched, but he stepped forward. No one spoke. They just joined the line. Together, they fought. When the rain came, it came like mercy, hard and sudden, drumming the earth in furious rhythm. The flames hissed and died, steam rising like ghosts set free. Eli dropped to his knees, soaked and shivering, forehead pressed to the soil. Myra crouched beside him, hands muddy, dress torn. You stayed, he whispered. So did you. The next morning dawned quiet, the sky washed clean. The field was blackened at the edges but alive in its heart. The foundation still stood. In the days that followed, no one mentioned the ghost stories. No one nailed chickens to gates. Instead, they brought wood, nails, slate. Children wandered up, curious and barefoot. The sheriff tipped his hat once and never came back. Myra painted the schoolhouse sign herself. Eli taught them how to mend fences and grow things from dust. He spoke little, but his hands told stories. Sometimes, Myra read aloud on the porch, her voice carrying like wind across wheat. The land no longer moaned at night. Sometimes, when the wind was just right, it laughed. And if you passed through that quiet bend in the prairie, you might hear it. A whisper, soft and certain. Even cursed ground can bloom, if someone is brave enough to stay.